there everyone, welcome to the Team Yume podcast. I am your main host and overlord, Madhog the Master, joined as usual by the boy of many wonders, WhyBoy, and
Hello.
Tonight we have the disembodied voice of Devar Arcvarron.
Hello there, everybody. I'm the conscience for Madhog and WhyBoy tonight.
Zoinks!
Oh.
Ghost! Devar Arcvarron, yes, my own personal black butler. And it's an
Please
anime reference. He's not actually black.
Please do not tell me that I have to keep on saying I'm one hell of a butler every episode.
Yeah.
Oh, he does that.
Yeah, also, sadly, I am not as man-cakey as him.
You are easy to envelop in a hug. Because you're a human stick, essentially.
Yeah, being 50 kilograms, aka 110 pounds, will do that.
Oh, God.
That's... wow. You know, there is this wrestler by the name of Cheeseburger, and he is 145 pounds.
Wow.
And I think he's about as big as you are.
Wow. So, anyway, trivia and WhyBoy on me.
Yeah.
I have seen this person in real life up close. It was terrifying. He should not be alive, but yet here he is. Maybe he's actually a ghost. And we are hearing his voice. He's haunting this podcast, you guys.
Yeah, no wonder he's so light.
Aww.
Oh, this is a light-hearted podcast. Except
Yeah,
it isn't. Let's talk about politics, guys.
Oh no! Oh gosh! Okay, abandon ship! Everybody, red alert!
Okay, so I wanted to just dive into this topic right away. Getting rid of the heavier discussion, the heavier subject as quickly as possible, in order to then transition to much lighter arguments, you know? To lighten up the mood and not make us feel so depressed. Me,
Right.
Too late. Too late.
So, last Sunday, something important happened. Something consequential. Something that has meaning. Something in quotation marks. And no, I'm not talking about the Academy Awards. Nobody cares about the Academy Awards. Nobody cares about a bunch of old men sitting in a circle and jerking each other. Both metaphorically and literally, I assume.
Yep.
It's their lifestyle, I'm not judging.
Yeah.
No judgy.
No, something important happened in my country, which were the elections.
Yeah. I was just hearing about that, actually, just yesterday.
Yeah, it's on the news on British televisions as well. Well, let's do the song and dance. You're not Irish! You're not Irish and Russian! And you're not an oarsman either.
That-
The Olympics.
Well, that was the dance. Who's
Yeah.
providing the song?
That was definitely a dance.
That was definitely not an Irish Russian dance.
It was whatever came to mind dance. Me failing the Fiddles McGinty has nothing to do with any of this, sadly. I wanted to vent a little bit about the current situation with the election and the elected government, or lack thereof, as it were. But in order to do that, I have to somehow explain to you how the electoral system works and basically how Italian politics usually work. And by that I mean they don't, but let's pretend they do.
Let's just call it a nightmarish mess and everybody will understand instantly.
It is a nightmarish mess, but in ways that one could not even possibly fathom. You know that bureaucratic dystopia depicted in the film Brazil?
Yeah.
It's worse. Where do I start? I guess I have to start from the beginning. We abolished the monarchy. Right? That's part of our history. And we started up with a republic. Instead of having a system that gives too much power to a single individual, we created a system that gives power to nobody.
Right.
With a few exceptions here and there. And they're all bad examples, by the way. So, we have parties in Italy. Not 2 parties, not 3 parties. As of this election, 11.
Yeah.
I counted 11.
Well, plenty of choice there.
Yeah.
You'd think so, but no. In reality, the only choice is between 3. When we go to vote to decide a government, we are not just voting one individual and the party they represent. No, we are essentially determining positions in the Senate and the Congress, which is more or less how every election works. We are not voting a individual in power, we are voting a party. And the individual that happens to run that party, then we'll get to run the majority of various Senate and Congress seats that they happen to garner. That's not just a way we determine a government, that's also a way in which we determine political opposition.
Right.
Okay,
So it sounds similar to Britain with how their politics work with the whole...
It's a fairly tried and true system all around Europe, as far as I know.
Yeah, they also do it a little bit in Canada as well, as we put into representatives. All our sectors basically go towards the Prime Minister's role.
You don't have 11 parties, though, do you?
We have 4.
Well,
4 is a reasonable number.
While in my country, we have 3 parties, which are the main 3, and you always have 2 random ones, and 1 complete lunatic who tries to pawn off some sort of, like, title of, oh, we are the complete loony party, vote for us! I am not joking. I am not joking. One year we had that.
The bar. Oh, you think that's weird? You think that's bizarre? Son, hold my beer that I don't have.
Yeah, I know.
Hold my bottle of water. There it is. Okay. I'm going to tell you stories.
Please do.
So the last time we've had a solid government that lasted all of its 5 years of mandate. The last time we've had that was 2001.
It not was too far off.
Yeah.
Not too far off. It's 2001.
Yeah, it's a decade ago.
The last time we've had an actual government that lasted all the 5 years it was intended to was in 2001. And it just happened to be the Berlusconi government.
Ah, right, yeah.
Oh.
There's a guy who basically made a song about how great he is and had a bunch of women sing about how great he is.
That's the guy. It's the guy that went into politics to escape debt and fiscal prosecution, which is more or less the same pattern for every capitalist that ends up in politics. Donald Trump!
Yeah.
He was good at the political game in coming out on the stage, all smiley. Look at me, I'm such a good guy, vote for me. Hey, 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 paisano. And he's actually from Milan, not from Naples, so the paisano part is completely inappropriate. But that's for me to know and for you to don't care. So he ruled Italy for 5 years, and it was a straight-up totalitarian regime. He censored everyone he didn't like. A lot of satirical comedians and journalists lost their job because he didn't like what they had to say. And that was the Berlusconi government. Now, he would end up being elected again a few years down the line, but that government of his would only last a couple of months, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 2001 Berlusconi government was his second government.
Right.
Right.
Out of 3. The first one was in 1994. That only lasted 6 months. So the problem that we have in Italy is that governments don't tend to last all that much.
Yeah.
Not a stable foundation by the sounds of things, to be honest.
Not a stable foundation.
Yeah, a lot of the candidates that I just heard about are just more crazy.
So, the Berlusconi government screwed us over big time with the economy, and we never were able to recover from that. The subsequent left-leaning governments did not manage to do anything at all in that regard, and so we became stuck in a perpetual loop in which there is a left-leaning government that tries to do something, but then they get stopped by a strong opposition, and the vice versa also applies.
Yeah.
There are too many parties. They are all very much attached to that little sliver of power that they can hold. There is always somebody who votes for them, so they always end up with seats in Parliament and Congress and the Senate and the various regions, rinse and repeat. For example, the Prime Minister that was serving his duty to govern the country before the election was a guy who was put in to replace a previous government, which was put in to replace a previous government, which was put in to replace a previous government, and I forgot when was the last time that we, the people of Italy, actually democratically elected somebody. And I have been using the word government so many times it has lost all meaning, so from now on, instead of government, I'm going to say pigsty. How are we ever going to have a proper solid pigsty if there are so many parties with so many voter bases? How are we going to work around that? Well, there is a way by which the politicians have figured out how to make all things work in theory. Enter the coalitions.
Oh no.
The coalitions are pretty much wrestling stables in that regard. They are formed out of nowhere between people that share a ideal, center-left coalition and a center-right coalition. Those are the two big coalitions. But, just like a wrestling stable, members of such coalition keep changing, and therefore there isn't a solid foundation. There are constant backstabbings and betrayals, and people moving out and people moving in.
Sounds like a drama.
The political drama is a soap opera. So, this year, like every year in which there are elections, there are the two big coalitions. The right-leaning one, the left-leaning one, and all that. The idea is that, guys, if we ally ourselves with each other, we all share the same vision for this country, then we can take all the votes that we have received individually and add them together. That way, we can become more powerful than ever. Does that sound like a logical conclusion? On paper, it is. It's stupid that we have to do this, but on paper, it's a solution. But not this year. Why? Because of the newcomer.
Here comes a new challenger!
In the past few years, a newer, younger, and more energetic, youthful political party has established itself. And they were really quick to make enemies out of literally everybody in the other political areas.
Right.
They have received a huge traction from that part of Italy, mostly younger people who are sick and tired of the current establishment. Basically, they are our equivalent of the Libertarian Party.
Right.
Although I'm actually using Libertarian as a shorthand to refer to them because I have no idea what they're supposed to stand for. Nobody has any idea what they are supposed to stand for. They have no idea what they are supposed to stand for. The only reason why they are so popular is because they barked louder and more vehemently than anyone else. And they are really good in promoting themselves via social media. Hence why they are the younger, more attractive party to vote for. But again, their whole political statement is everyone else suck, so give us a chance. And you know what? And you know what?
Everyone did give a chance.
It kind of almost completely worked. It does not help that A, the center-left coalition has failed us too many times to count, and the center-right coalition is led by the party known as the League of the North.
Oh my god.
Which sounds really cool, but they are the party of the xenophobic fascists.
Oh.
Oh god.
Yes, their argument has always been about immigration is bad. If there is one thing that awakens the xenophobe inside a soul here in Italy, is immigrants. You have better brace yourselves, guys. You are not going to believe this.
I'm braced.
He totally looks braced, guys.
I'm braced. Totally.
The so-called Libertarian Party that I'm talking about is named the 5-Star Party.
Yeah.
Well,
The 5 stars.
that, are you sure this party wasn't just a joke that they basically decided no one's gonna vote for us?
Well, funny you should mention this. Real funny you should mention this, because the guy who founded this party originally was a comedian.
Yep. He was.
His
Real
name
funny
was
guy.
Beppe Grillo. And yes, he used to be a comedian that became really, really angry at the government and ended up essentially... Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say Pigsty. He became really, really angry at the Pigsty, that his angry opinion became a manifestation of the anger that's residing in all of us. Unfortunately, his party turned out to be just as bad as the other ones.
Yeah.
In
He
many
did make him a
ways.
fun day, though. I believe he came up with days called fuck off days.
You would be right about that. But Beppe Grillo is not the one running for the government and leading his party to victory. No, it's a guy named Di Maio, which sounds like the...
Cinco de Mayo.
I was going to say it sounds like the name of a yogurt, but I'm going to go with Cinco de Mayo. It's a bit more dignified, but not by much. So, in spite of the 5-star party running solo for these elections, not being part of any coalition, they still garnered 32% of the total votes.
That's quite something.
Yeah.
Which is more than the entirety of the left coalition managed to garner. Basically, the leading party of the left coalition was the Democratic Party, because yes, now we have one of those here too as well, which had a 18% of total votes. But the remaining 4 parties in the coalition struggled to get a 4% in total. Meanwhile, there is the right-leaning coalition led by the xenophobic fascist. Now, that coalition, they managed to garner a grand total of 37% of the entire voter space. But none of the parties in the coalition managed to get an individual sum of votes that can even remotely match the total that was garnered by the 5-star party alone. The second party with the most number of votes was the Democratic Party, and 18%, and the third one to gather more votes was the League of the North, La Lega Nord, if you want to be more Italian about it. And then there was the Berlusconi Party, which was indeed, first of all, still running. Second of all, yes, part of the right-leaning coalition. That was the 4th most voted one. So at the very least, somebody learned their lessons. And to think that good old Silvio Berlusconi tried to buy votes by telling people, hey, I'm going to add 1,000 euros in your pension, you old senior citizens, come vote for me.
Can I ask one thing? Like, I've heard that, like, when he first got out of politics, he basically got barred from taking in politics for like 3 years or something. Like in 2016, he wasn't supposed to get back into it until 2019, but he's in it now.
Well,
I guess he can't do math.
I mean, and I think nobody can do math. So, what we have here is a really typical situation when it comes to Italian politics. We are at the cusp of determining a new pigsty, but there are not enough votes in either direction to guarantee a strong pigsty to begin with. That wouldn't just cease to exist after a couple of months because the opposition is too strong. But you know what? None of that actually matter in the slightest, because none of the parties managed to get a 40% of total votes. And 40% is the minimum requirement to win the election!
Yeah, I can see that being frustrating.
This is a circus clown. This is Italian politics, the long-standing running gag of European politics. We are the most laughed at, laughed off, and just pointed at and laughed at country in the European Union. To recap one final time, this year the choice was in between the faction of kill all immigrants, the faction of everybody sucks but us, and the faction of hey, we exist, please vote for us. Yay, we are the left, so strong you guys, completely obliterated the left was. Oh, there was technically one more choice, but nobody cared about that. It was the choice that said, we are going to illegalize pornography.
Yeah, no one cared about that.
0.something%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very sad.
It's a sad state of affairs.
Indeed.
Can I take off this top hat and the empty teacup now?
By all means, I'm going to take this invisible ball and pass it on to others so that they get to talk about their favorite topics of discussion.
Oh gosh, what do we have on for tonight, I wonder?
So who wants to go first?
WhyBoy, do you have anything that you want to talk about? Because mine is a video game, essentially.
I think you should go, because I've mostly just been, like, drowning in work.
A couple of months back, I bought a little game called Dissidia Final Fantasy NT.
Why?
Well, you see, I have to go back at the beginning because, you see, yes, because you see, for lack of a better term, I am a sort of fan of the Final Fantasy series, only of a specific era of Final Fantasy, mind you, but I'm still a fan of the series to some extent. Namely, that 7 got me into the franchise properly, you know, and 9 is still my most favorite. This is a gross summary, essentially, of that aspect of me. And 10 kind of bored me, and yeah, even trying all the other Final Fantasies, I had, like, some good and some bad experiences here and there. But yeah, I still like the series, and I especially like fighting games, so mixing those two things together with Final Fantasy and a fighting game genre is like, yes, I would like that in my life.
He would like that, my boy. And you heard that. He would like that. Boom. Okay, yes. No, please do go on. I'm not being childish or anything.
Don't worry, I'm childish with you as well, so... Dissidia Final Fantasy NT is technically the third sequel to 2 PlayStation Portable games of Dissidia Final Fantasy.
Oh, this is getting complex already. Can we go back to Italian politics? That's much simpler.
No, we're not going back to that pigsty. Anyway, as I was saying, so they first started off with a Dissidia Final Fantasy on the PlayStation Portable, the first make of it, I should say. And it did rather well for itself, and I didn't own the handheld, but my brother did, so I was able to experience the story indirectly by him, by watching the cutscenes. And
that's the best way to experience a video game.
Well, if you love narratives, then only for one aspect, yes.
Well, you know, if you love narratives, I would argue that Final Fantasy is not the best place to go to.
Oh, no. No, it isn't. Fantasy 9 is, though. Anyway.
At least the first half of Fantasy 9. Not so much the second half.
So, yeah, anyway. The story wasn't anything that great, but you can tell that the way the creators wrote the story, at least it celebrated its history. The dialogue can be a bit flowery for my taste, and a bit too poetic, and a bit too, like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, you remember that, don't you, audience? A bit too much of that.
This is starting to sound awfully familiar to Kingdom Hearts, but please do go on.
But despite all that, the story itself, you know, at least, like I said before, celebrated its history, and also, in some cases, surprisingly gives some more depth to certain characters who didn't have much time to give any depth to. Not by much, but just a little, just to basically make you think, huh, is that what they were going for in the original?
They probably weren't.
It probably wasn't, but, you know... But still, I appreciated that effort that went into it, if you know what I mean. And then Duodecim happened, which was the sequel slash prequel to it, which Maya had essentially came at the time of when lightning was everywhere and she had to be shoved down everyone's throats as the main character.
Speaking of lightning, have you seen the latest design for Cloud for the remake of Final Fantasy VII?
I actually don't. Haven't kept up to date on that, to be honest.
I have seen it, and he looks more and more like lightning. And it's funny because it was the opposite originally.
Lightning is a mixture between Squall and Cloud, sadly.
Oh yes, I mean she has the appearance of Cloud and the personality or lack thereof of Squall. So it's the perfect blend of blandness.
Exactly. And I must defy fate trope. But yeah, as I was saying, Duodecim kind of screwed the pooch with the story because in order to make Lightning look good, they had to ruin 2 other characters in the process.
It sounds like Roman Reigns was booked in the first 2 years of his main event push.
I would argue Roman Reigns is Lightning of wrestling.
Roman Reigns is better than Lightning. There, I said something nice about him.
Well, yes, of course, right now he is, in certain cases only. But anyway, and the other worst part of Duodecim, it made buying the first game absolutely pointless because the first game has been shoved in to Duodecim, its sequel prequel. So if you bought the original before Duodecim or bought both of them at the same time, you might as well just bought Duodecim, is what I'm saying. It's completely ridiculous. NT gets a bit weird about this whole thing. You see, before Dissidia Final Fantasy NT was a thing, it was an arcade machine in Japan, essentially.
An arcade inch machine?
It was an arcade machine game, essentially. So, essentially, what they did is...
well, at least it was not a pachinko machine.
Well, yeah, of course it wasn't. But the interesting thing about this arcade title, which was just called simply Dissidia Final Fantasy, is that... let me figure out how to say this now. Is that this game was not developed by Square Enix. It was developed by our good friends, Team Ninja.
Oh no. Oh yes.
Oh no.
Koei Tecmo to others who might know them by that name as well. And there's a
boy.
And if you all know your controversies as of right now with Team Ninja,
yes, we do.
Dynasty Warriors 9, that's a whole different kettle of fish that I myself am not getting into right now.
Yes. Hey guys, do you remember Metroid Other M? No? I don't blame you.
But yet, the interesting thing about this is that Team Ninja worked indirectly with Square Enix. The arcade was a big success, so much so that they decided to port this arcade title to the PlayStation 4.
Oh, this is going to end well.
And it was called NT, just to basically show that difference. And during this time, new characters were being released, and these new characters were being added to NT. And then we come to the final product, which basically boasts having a story mode along with other features not found in the arcade.
Tell us all about the story mode then. I cannot wait to hear it.
Before I get to that, I want to lay down a few positives first, just so then I can say the game is good. It's fine. It's decent if you're into squad-based fighting games with a overly action-packed flair to it, with some layer of minimal strategy involved and getting to learn characters in the actual game that you're playing. Let's see, and the choice of characters are quite vast. It even adds a couple of new ones in the form of Ace from Final Fantasy Zero and Ramza Beloved from Final Fantasy Tactics, which is my second favorite Final Fantasy game to come out from them back in the PlayStation. So that was a big plus for me. And the stages are quite vast, and there's quite a few of them, that's for sure. And overall, it's good for a multiplayer experience, though online only, because sadly there's no offline functionality to this whole thing. And sadly, that's where all the my praises go for this game. Because starting with the small negatives, there's this new mode called Core Battles, which is absolutely infuriating if you're playing with AI-controlled characters, because instead of a typical match where basically you have to knock people out with your special, let's put it that way, and knock them out completely to zero, Core Battles is this whole thing of domination mixed with just destroy the core, essentially. No, actually, it'd be more akin to a MOBA, destroy the core, only there's less strategy involved, unless you were playing online, I would believe.
I don't think any of us can follow what you just said, but we're going to pretend we did, so... Somebody will understand what you're talking about. We would have to have our hands on the game itself to understand what you are referring to. That would be the equivalent of me starting to talk to you out of the blue about the gameplay mechanics of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 without you
Any
knowing the game. It would be too complicated to understand.
Okay, I understand, but just know that this mode is infuriating with AI because it feels like as if your player AI is not smart enough to deal with it, but the enemy AI is smart enough to deal with you, if you know what I'm saying.
Now that I can understand.
So unless you were playing this online, I cannot say if this mode is any good. Also, despite the fact there's a lot of characters, some of them are missing. Like, Gabranth is missing from the original title, and I'm pretty sure he was a favorite to some people since Final Fantasy XII, always totes Gabranth as one of the interesting villains, even though I disagree with that. Because 12 ruins that for me, so...
I have been making comparisons between Dissidia and Kingdom Hearts out of jest during this entire monologue of yours, but the more you talk about it, the more it sounds exactly like Kingdom Hearts.
I would also like to say that I hate one stage just because it's boring, and that's Final Fantasy VIII stage, which is the Meadow of Promise, as they call it.
Is there anything even remotely interesting from that game?
The original Dissidia, to have, what stage represented Final Fantasy VIII originally, was Ultimecia's castle. Literally the only place of interest, just because it was a swanky pad, essentially.
A swanky pad? Did you hear that, WhyBoy? It was a swanky pad!
A swanky pad? Oh my god, holy crap.
Yeah.
What does swanky mean? How can I make fun of it if I don't know what swanky means?
It's a fancy castle.
Oh, it's a fancy schmancy castle.
With that said, all those tiny negatives with some diversions, we get to the single-player content. The story is rushed garbage.
I am not surprised about that. Are you, WhyBoy?
No.
Thank you for your insightful input.
Well, I was considering.
Considering what? What precedents? What solid foundations of narrative supremacy has this series given you to believe that this game was going to have a good story? It's a stupid, nonsensical crossover between Final Fantasy characters, but without the Disney ones, so it's even less interesting.
The original Dissidia had a lot of effort put into it, and a lot of interesting narrative quirks to it.
I can hear your teeth grinding, as you say, interesting in the context of that.
Despite the negative I gave Duodecim, it still has a lot more effort in the writing than this did. This is a sequel to the two PSP games, and considering how the PSP sold not very well, there's gonna be a small number of people who won't get this story. Because characters are constantly referencing the last two games by going, hey, this happened, and you're like, what happened? This happened? When? And so some things will come out of nowhere to some people who are only going off of their knowledge of these characters from the original games they came from rather than Dissidia itself. Sephiroth introduces the main threat, which every other story introduces in some way or form. And because everyone is introducing this new threat, that means there's no character development with everybody, there's no building of bonds, there's focusing on this one thing where no one grows from it, and everyone feels wasted.
If you think about it, most crossover games are exactly like that.
Yeah, but in Dissidia, at least, there was motivations. Characters were, working towards their own, goals while following the main story.
They have to stop the Heartless, otherwise their homes will be destroyed. We must find the Keyblades and unlock the true heart of the universe, which turns out is pure light hidden in darkness, because the heart! The heart, man! The heart!
And there's other moments like this where basically villain fights the good guys, and then suddenly they stop fighting after you beat the match, but that they make out you just stop fighting, and suddenly the good guys and bad guy suddenly go like, hey, we should work together. Seriously, that's how it goes. It's like the villain comes in going like, I am going to destroy you and fight you, and suddenly, hey, we should work together. Okay. Squall and Lightning are not important at all. They have nothing in the story at all.
That's good.
Good, but also terrible in that regard. And all this just for a story that basically says, hey, you know what? We may have a sequel in this. I'm not kidding. Despite defeating this huge, big evil of Shinryu, who is eating all the dimensions of their memories and all that, just so order and chaos cannot exist anymore, it ends with just the most lackluster, hey, we might have a sequel. For the money I spent, I felt a bit cheapened for it, and a bit annoyed for this whole thing, because it felt like they went out of their way to do the retro minimum compared to meeting the minimum bar that fighting games have already set.
And they could not even meet the minimum bar of 40%, which is what they needed to get elected!
Yes. And most likely, the story doesn't make sense right now, but I think that's because they said that they were going to release DLC characters who would slot in the rest of the pieces. But considering that, the story is complete garbage, and nothing can save it.
In conclusion, you are not satisfied with this game.
I am not satisfied, because there's a lack of single-player content. There's only one mode for me to play now, which is just arcade, I would say. Something close to it anyway. So, if you're gonna buy this game for the gameplay alone, wait for it to be on sale. That's all I'm gonna say on it. So, I'm sorry that it took longer than I expected. I only expected it to take as long as you did, 45 minutes, but it took longer for some reason.
Oh, I've seen Black Panther today, speaking of films.
Yeah, we can discuss that now, because last time all I could say was, yep.
Hold on. Devar, have you seen Black Panther?
No, I've not seen Black Panther.
We can't discuss Black Panther.
Don't worry, I could put my fingers into my headphone ears.
But no, actually, I really don't have that much to say about Black Panther. I don't have that much to add to an already rich discussion that has been said and done many times. It's a good film.
Yeah.
There are a few things that I did not enjoy, mostly having to do with some of the editing for the action scenes, and sometimes the message about colonialism and the consequences thereof tends to be a bit on the nose. And I'm not just talking about the main villain coming into the scene and saying, I'm going to use colonialism to destroy the colonizers. The colonizers. The white man must die. That's what I'm trying to say. Although I will say that mid-end credit scene in which Prince T'Challa gets in front of the UN to have that impassioned monologue about what we can do to save the world is akin to Steven Seagal telling everybody, we must protect the environment! Again, a bit on the nose. It's an important message and the film conveys it well in a straightforward and refreshing manner that many people can connect with it. But it gets a bit too much at times. Not always, just occasionally.
It definitely feels like that.
What is clever about Killmonger is that he is a product of racism and colonialism. And that is what makes him an interesting antagonist, a surprisingly complex one by Marvel standards.
When you say by Marvel standards...
Well, they don't have a good track record when it comes to antagonists now, do they?
Killmonger's motive. They killed my dad. I'm gonna screw the world.
Black Panther is pretty good. As far as Marvel films go, it's a top tier one. My favorite of the Marvel films still remains Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, because it provided a deeply immersive emotional journey that I was able to connect on a, again, personal level.
Oh, I love Guardians of the Galaxy, both 1 and 2. It definitely
it
was.
felt intimate, even though it had eventually a grandiose angle in which you have to save the universe completely by accident. It still had a strong, emotional, intimate core, and that's why it's still my favorite of their films, the most different, in fact. But still, Black Panther is pretty good. I adored the world building. Its success will spurt mainstream Hollywood cinema to be even more open about representation in the future, and that's an absolute good.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that myself. I mean, because, you know, you still have that part of Hollywood that is weird.
Academy Awards! Yes, the Academy Awards are a manifestation of everything wrong with Hollywood. Merely a manifestation, mind you, but a pretty strong and blatant one nonetheless. Get Out is not a Oscar film. No, it shouldn't be here. How dare they say I'm racist? Some of my best slaves are black.
Oh, gosh.
Says everyone in the Oscars Guild. Is it right to call it a guild, like they were the Thieves Guild? Some sort of medieval fantasy ancestral guild that governs the world from the shadows? So I had even more topics to bring up for this podcast, but seeing as we're running short of time due to circumstances, I guess I'll reserve them for another podcast altogether. Nevertheless, this was an eventful podcast, even though we discussed approximately 2 things.
Well, 3 if you count Black Panther.
Okay. 2 things and a half. And I guess that will do for a podcast. I just want to say one last thing before we go.
Yeah.
So this week I watched the animated pilot for Harpy Gee. the long-running, long-standing fantasy webcomic. Are you perchance familiar with Harpy Gee?
Not really.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Harpy Gee, which is a pun, an obvious one at that,
Yeah.
is a long-running webcomic that's still going on to this day. And the creator of the comic made an animated pilot that was actually featured on the Nickelodeon YouTube channel. So it's been officially presented for review to Nickelodeon in hopes of it becoming an animated series. And I've got to say, that's quite impressive. I don't particularly care personally for Harpy Gee. I tried to read it, but something about the world and the characters doesn't appeal to me at a fundamental level, and it had a few pacing problems right at the beginning, so I fell off of it. But still, to see a webcomic potentially becoming an animated series, or at least having a official animated pilot featured by Nickelodeon, is quite an impressive feat, I have to say, and I am very impressed by the achievement itself. So yes, I'd love to one day see a animated pilot for Lackadaisy, for example.
Yes, and then all the furries will be asking for their webcomics, their favorite webcomics to be animated, like Las Lindas and Ask Jam, Tumblr page.
Devar, Devar, in between this and you taking the podcast hostage, you are on thin ice, young man. I'm watching you.
I'll hold you to that then, if next time we do a Let's Play and you take my Let's Plays hostage.
Technically, now they are my Let's Plays because I'm the one playing, so I have the power, I have the control, I am going to win the election, hopefully I get 40%. And I'm going to name my party the 5-Star Beard. And WhyBoy, would you like to add anything to the discussion here?
I don't really know what to add at this point.
Not even about how interesting the concept of a webcomic becoming animated is.
I would like to either see the comic or the short. I've only seen like,
you
a few
can
of
watch
the
it.
Nicktoons. Yeah, I'll have to go and actually see them. Now, I am liking how Nicktoons has been posting those pilots much more recently now. I've been watching a few of them. Haven't seen them all yet. But I really like it that they're doing that now.
Indeed.
Having the public actually have a more free voice in the whole thing.
Yes, it's a inherently good thing. It's the kind of exposure that helps artists in the long run. As I said last time, even if they don't get picked up by the major networks, they might just become Netflix shows in the future, like Forever 12.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we can successfully or unsuccessfully, depending on how you view it, conclude this podcast. Guys, if you have any plugging to do, please do them. Come on, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
I will plug WhyBoy's Toon Grin, just because it's a way better channel than mine.
Aww.
And I'll plug Devar's.
Oh, but no, I'm not
content is good too.
I'm not posting as much right now, but even though I'm trying to get back to posting. Sadly,
we'll plug each other.
I'll plug you both.
Oh god!
In more ways than one.
Please don't make this weird.
Hello, this is the Team Yume podcast. Have we met before?
You're right. This is where everything and nothing happens.
Yes. This is where franchises go to die. Right, so, and with that said, you can find us on the proverbial social media, proverbial and actual social media. I don't know why I said proverbial, but there you go. You can follow me on Twitter and Fuckbook, and the Tumblr, if you want. You can find all the useful links to my social media, as always, in the description of the YouTube video. You can choose to support me and this show on Patreon, still in the description. And you can subscribe to this channel and hopefully click on the little notification bell so that you can be adjourned whenever there is a new upload.
I wish I had a bell now so I could rig it.
Ding dong.
The witch is dead.
I have been your politically charged host, Madhog Thy Master.
And I have been your hostage taker for the evening of this podcast. Inadvertently, might I add.
And I've been WhyBoy the White.
WhyBoy the White, the supreme wizard of the Order of Caucasians.
Yeah.
Coming from the League of the North, the secret thievery guild that governs the underworld.
Should have freeze framed while we were laughing.
This is the part where the main villain shows up and he's rapping, "Yeah, you, I'm the tallest of mountains and the darkest of these."
If only.